The Academy's dark secret. The lecture hall of the Galactic Military Academy fell silent as Professor Korvac Thanos activated the holographic display. His forearms moved in practiced synchronization, each one manipulating different controls, while his bioluminescent markings pulsed in deep blues and purples, a sign of serious contemplation among his Alteran people. Today, we discuss the most classified doctrine in galactic military history, he announced, his voice carrying the weight of centuries, the Terran prohibition. Cadet Nira Veloz shifted uncomfortably in her seat, her crystalline features catching the ambient light of the classroom. The violet-skinned Zephyrian had always been the most inquisitive student in advanced tactical studies, but something about today's lesson made her skin shimmer with nervous energy. Professor. She raised her hand, her voice melodic like wind chimes in a gentle breeze. Why exactly are humans forbidden from participating in galactic warfare? The official records list them as Class 7 primitive species, hardly a threat to our advanced civilizations. Professor Thanos's four eyes focused on her, his luminescent patterns shifting to a cautious amber. Ah, Cadet Veloz, always the curious one. He paused, seemingly weighing his words. The truth is complicated. From the back of the classroom, Jackson Cross listened intently while maintaining his carefully constructed cover. To his classmates, he appeared to be just another exchange student from the Outer Rim colonies, his human heritage carefully concealed beneath genetic modifications and forged documentation. Earth intelligence had spent 3 years preparing him for this moment. Complicated how? Nira pressed, her natural curiosity overriding protocol. Either they're a threat or they're not. The professor's secondary arms began a nervous gesture, tapping against his desk in a complex rhythm. Very well, you're all advanced students, sworn to secrecy. I suppose it's time you learned why we truly fear the species from South-3. Jackson's pulse quickened. This was at the moment Earth had been waiting for. The real reason behind humanity's exile from galactic society. It began with the Proxima Campaign of 2387. Professor Thanos continued, his voice dropping to barely above a whisper. The Draconian Empire was locked in a bitter conflict with the Insectoid Hive Collective. Desperate for allies, they recruited what they believed to be primitive humans as cannon fodder. The holographic display shifted, showing star maps and battle formations. The Draconians thought they were clever, using these primitives to absorb enemy fire while their own forces maneuvered for decisive strikes. They couldn't have been more wrong. Nira leaned forward, her crystalline spines tingling with anticipation. What happened? The humans didn't just fight the war, Professor Thanos said, his patterns now cycling through worried reds and oranges. They reimagined it. While other species had evolved warfare to be honorable, ritualistic, with clear rules of engagement, humans approached it like a puzzle to be solved by any means necessary. Jackson fought to keep his expression neutral as his classmates exchanged confused glances. He'd studied the sanitized versions of these campaigns in Earth's military academies, but never the alien perspective. They took our weapons, the professor continued, studied them for exactly 47 minutes, then proceeded to modify them in ways that violated 3 fundamental laws of physics and 17 principles of civilized warfare. Surely our superior technology, began a crystalline student from the middle row. Superior? Professor Thanos's laugh was bitter. We had plasma rifles that could pierce starship hulls. They looked at them and said, interesting. But what if we reversed the polarity and created a gravitational cascade effect? The next thing we knew, they were using our own weapons to collapse enemy formations into microscopic singularities. The classroom erupted in gasps and concerned chittering from various species. Nira's crystalline features had paled to an almost translucent white. But that's not the worst part, Professor Thanos said, his patterns now a deep, fearful purple. The worst part was their complete disregard for what we considered the civilized way of war. They had this concept called Geneva Conventions, a list of things too horrible to do in warfare. Jackson tensed. This was getting dangerously close to classified human history. That sounds noble, Nira said softly, her voice barely audible. Oh, my dear student. Professor Thanos's four eyes seemed to look directly into her soul. You misunderstand. They made that list, and then they did everything that wasn't on it. The silence that followed was deafening. Even the classroom's environmental systems seemed to pause in anticipation. They didn't just win battles, the professor continued, his voice becoming increasingly strained. They won wars before they started. They psychological warfare into an art form. They would study enemy cultures, find their deepest fears, their most sacred beliefs, and then weaponize them. As the class ended and students filed out in stunned silence, Nira found herself walking beside Jackson. The human exchange student seemed oddly calm compared to the rest of their classmates. "That was intense," she said, her voice carrying a mixture of fascination and fear. Jackson looked at her, really looked at her, and for a moment his carefully maintained cover slipped. "Sometimes the most dangerous thing about a species isn't their strength," he said quietly. "It's their willingness to think differently." Nira stopped walking, her crystalline features catching the light as she studied his face. There was something in his eyes, a depth that shouldn't exist in someone from the Outer Rim colonies. "You talk like you know something about it." "Maybe I do," Jackson replied, then quickly added, "Academic interest, you understand. I've always been fascinated by military history." As they stood there in the corridor, other students flowing around them like water around stones, Nira felt something she'd never experienced before, a stirring of attraction mixed with a dangerous curiosity about this mysterious fellow student. "Would you like to study together tonight?" she asked, her voice softer than she intended. "I have access to some restricted files that might help us understand Professor Thanos's lecture better." Jackson's mission protocols screamed warnings in his head, but as he looked into Nira's violet eyes, he found himself nodding. "I'd like that very much." Neither of them noticed Professor Thanos watching from the shadows, his bioluminescent patterns cycling through colors that spelled out a single word in ancient Alteran: danger. The Proxima campaign file Scamander Zara Nightwind's obsidian scales rippled with agitation as she accessed the restricted archives deep within the Draconian High Command. Her wings, folded tightly against her back, trembled with barely contained energy. The files she'd discovered after Professor Thanos's leaked lecture transcripts had shaken her to her core. "Computer, display Proxima Campaign File 7 Alpha Zulu," she commanded, her voice carrying the authority of 3 centuries of military service. The holographic display materialized, showing tactical readouts that made no sense, energy signatures that violated known physics, casualty reports that read like fiction. "Dr. Elena Vasquez," she spoke into her communicator, "I need to see you. Now. An hour later, the human xenobiologist stood in Zara's private office, her dark hair streaked with premature silver from years of intense research. She was smaller than the imposing Draconian commander, but her presence filled the room with quiet confidence. "Commander Nightwind," Elena said, her voice steady despite the tension crackling between them. "I assume this is about the files." Zara's golden eyes fixed on her. "You know what I found? I've been waiting for someone to find them for over 50 years. Elena moved closer, and Zara caught her scent, distinctly human, but with something else. Something that made her scaled skin warm. "The question is, what do you plan to do about it?" "I plan to understand," Zara said, her voice softer than intended. "Help me understand what my people did, what your people became." Elena activated her personal datapad, and the room filled with holographic recordings from the Proxima campaign. "Your ancestors thought they were recruiting primitive soldiers. Instead, they unleashed something the galaxy had never seen." The first recording showed human soldiers examining Draconian plasma rifles. Within minutes, they had disassembled the weapons and were sketching modifications on primitive paper. "They didn't just adapt your technology," Elena explained, stepping so close to Zara that their different body heats created visible distortions in the air. "They improved it. That plasma rifle your people were so proud of. Humans turned it into 17 different weapons, including one that could phase shift matter at the molecular level." Zara's scales darkened with shame. "We thought we were so superior." "You were," Elena said, placing a gentle hand on Zara's arm, marveling at the warmth beneath the scales. "In every way except one. You fought with honor. Humans fought to win." The next recording made Zara's breath catch. It showed human medics not just treating wounded enemies, but studying their biology, their psychology, their deepest fears. Within days, they were broadcasting targeted psychological warfare that caused entire enemy battalions to surrender without firing a shot. They weaponized compassion, Elena continued, her voice thick with emotion. They would save an enemy soldier's life, learn everything about their family, their culture, their beliefs, and then use that knowledge to end conflicts before they escalated. Zara turned to face Elena fully, their faces inches apart. Is that why you left? Why you became a researcher instead of a soldier? I left because I fell in love, Elena whispered, her eyes meeting Zara's golden gaze, with the idea that we could be better, that understanding other species could be more powerful than defeating them. The space between them seemed to charge with electricity. Zara's hand came up to cup Elena's face, her clawed fingers incredibly gentle against human skin. Show me the rest, Zara said softly. All of it. The final recording was the most disturbing. It showed human commanders not celebrating their victories, but weeping for their enemies. They had won every battle, but at the cost of their own humanity. This is why we exiled ourselves, Elena said, leaning into Zara's touch. We realized we were too good at war, too creative, too willing to cross lines that shouldn't be crossed. The Geneva Conventions, Zara murmured, finally understanding. Not just rules of war, Elena corrected. Rules to remind us what we were in danger of becoming if we didn't stop ourselves. As the holographic displays faded, Zara pulled Elena closer, their different anatomies fitting together in ways that surprised them both. What happens now? Now, Elena said, her lips brushing against Zara's neck where scales met softer skin. We decide whether the galaxy is ready to trust us again, whether we're ready to trust ourselves. Their kiss was electric, scales against skin, fire against earth, two species finding connection across the void of space and time. The Ethics Committee hearing tribunal chamber, deep within the Galactic Council's most secure facility, had never hosted a hearing like this. Judge Kylix Vorthuk, his crystalline form refracting light into prismatic rainbows, presided over a court that would determine humanity's fate. Counselor Tess Meridian stood at the defendant's podium, her diplomatic training evident in every gesture. Across from her, General Marcus Stone sat ramrod straight in the witness chair, his scarred face impassive despite the weight of the testimony he was about to give. The court recognizes Counselor Meridian. Judge Vorthuk's voice resonated through the chamber like singing crystal. Your Honor, Tess began, her voice carrying the passion that had made her one of humanity's most effective diplomats. We are here to discuss the possibility of lifting the Terran prohibition. Humanity has spent over a century in self-imposed exile, developing new ethical frameworks for conflict resolution. Judge Vorthuk's faceted eyes focused on her. Counselor, the records show that humans didn't just participate in warfare, they revolutionized it in ways that terrified every civilized species in the galaxy. Tess felt her heart race, not just from the pressure of the moment, but from the intense stare Marcus was giving her from across the room. Their history was complicated, former lovers turned colleagues, passion transformed into professional respect, but never fully extinguished. General Stone, she called, her voice slightly husky. Please tell the court about Operation Nightfall. Marcus stood, his movements still carrying the precision of his military training despite his retirement. As he walked to the center of the chamber, Tess caught herself admiring the way he carried himself, confident without arrogance, strong without brutality. Operation Nightfall, Marcus began, his voice gravelly with age and experience, was designed to end the Centauri conflict without a single casualty on either side. Judge Vorthuk leaned forward, his crystalline structure creating musical notes as he moved. Elaborate, General. We studied the Centauri cultural matrix for 6 months, Marcus continued, his eyes meeting Tess's across the room. The look they shared carried 20 years of shared history, late nights strategizing, passionate arguments about ethics, stolen moments between crises. We learned that their warrior caste valued honor above life itself, so we gave them a way to surrender honorably. The holographic display activated, showing the Centauri home system. We created a false fleet, pure hologram, but indistinguishable from real warships. made it appear that they were outnumbered 1,000 to 1. Then we broadcast a message explaining that we had developed this technology specifically to avoid bloodshed. The result? Judge Vorthik asked. Marcus's weathered face softened slightly. The Centauri commander sent us a message thanking us for allowing his people to surrender with dignity intact. No shots fired. No lives lost. The conflict ended in 3 hours. Tess stepped forward, unable to hide the pride in her voice. This is what human warfare evolution looks like. Your Honor, we learn to win by not fighting, but the capacity for destruction remains, Judge Vorthik noted. The Geneva suggestion incident. The temperature in the room seemed to drop. Marcus's jaw tightened, and Tess felt old wounds reopening. The Geneva suggestion, Marcus said slowly, was our darkest moment. A single human strategist, working alone, developed a psychological warfare protocol so effective it could have ended all warfare forever. By making it impossible, Tess added, her voice barely above a whisper, by making every sentient being in the galaxy terrified to fight. Judge Vorthik's form seemed to dim. The records suggest this protocol was tested. Marcus nodded grimly. On a volunteer battalion of the toughest soldiers in human space. Within 6 hours, they were all in catatonic states, completely unable to conceptualize violence. The effect was permanent, and the strategist who developed it, Judge Vorthik asked. Tess and Marcus exchanged a look laden with history and pain. She volunteered to be the first test subject. Tess said quietly, to prove it worked, to ensure it could never be used again. The silence in the chamber was absolute. Judge Vorthik's crystalline form shifted through colors that had no names in any known language. Counselor Meridian, General Stone, he finally said, approach the bench. As they walked forward together, their hands brushed, and 20 years of separation seemed to collapse into nothing. The attraction that had driven them together, then apart, then into this moment, crackled between them like electricity. The court will recess, Judge Vorthik announced. But first, I have a question for both of you. If humanity is allowed to return to galactic affairs, how do we know you won't simply find new ways to be terrifyingly effective? Tess looked at Marcus, seeing in his eyes the same mixture of hope and fear that had defined their relationship. Because we learned something more important than how to win, she said. We learned how to choose not to, Marcus added, his hand finding hers. Judge Vorthik observed their intertwined fingers' human vulnerability made manifest. Court adjourned. Deliberations will continue tomorrow. As the chamber emptied, Tess and Marcus remained, finally alone after 2 decades of careful professional distance. The Geneva suggestion, Marcus said softly. Do you ever wonder if Anna was right, if the galaxy would be better if no one could fight? Tess turned to face him fully, their faces close enough that she could see the silver threading through his hair every day. But then I remember that the choice to be peaceful only matters if you could choose otherwise. Their kiss was inevitable. 20 years of separation dissolving in an instant. To people who had helped shape humanity's future, finally allowing themselves to have one of their own. The forbidden archives deep beneath the Earth's surface, in archives that officially didn't exist. Archivist Quinn Blackwood tended to humanity's darkest secrets. His pale features were illuminated by the soft glow of quantum storage matrices, each one containing information that could reshape galactic civilization or destroy it. The intrusion alarm was subtle, barely a whisper in the facility's ambient hum. But Quinn had been alone down here for so long that he noticed everything. He wasn't surprised when Lady Sivith Moonwhisper materialized from shadow itself, her ethereal form seeming to bend light around her. Impressive security, she said, her voice like silver bells in a gentle breeze. But Void Walkers have certain advantages. Quinn didn't look up from his work, though every instinct screamed danger. Lady Sivith, I've been expecting you. Her luminous eyes, if they could be called eyes, widened slightly. Expecting me. The Galactic Council's interest in our archives has been predictable. Quinn finally turned to face her and felt his breath catch. She was beautiful in the way that dying stars were beautiful, magnificent, and terrible, and absolutely otherworldly. The question is what you're really here for. Sivith moved closer, her form flickering between solid and translucent. The truth Why did humanity really withdraw from galactic warfare? Quinn smiled, an expression that didn't reach his eyes. Which truth? We have so many. Before Sivith could respond, the Archive's secondary security systems activated. Captain Rex Morrison materialized through a combat teleportation field. His special forces armor powered down, but his hand resting casually on his sidearm. Stand down, Rex, Quinn said calmly. Our guest is here for education, not extraction. Rex's scarred face showed surprise, but he didn't move his hand. Quinn, she's a void walker. They can phase through any containment we have. Which is why, Quinn continued, his eyes never leaving Sivith's mesmerizing form. I'm going to show her exactly what she wants to see. Sivith's ethereal features showed curiosity and something else, an attraction to Quinn's calm confidence. In the face of her otherworldly nature, you would share humanity's secrets willingly. Some secrets become more dangerous when kept, Quinn replied. Activating the Archive's central display, computer, access project Mindbridge files, Rex tensed. Quinn, those files are classified beyond cosmic secret. Not anymore. Quinn's fingers danced across holographic controls, and the Archive filled with images that made both Rex and Sivith step back in shock. The first recording showed human researchers working with captured enemy soldiers, not torturing them, but healing them, feeding them, showing them images of their families back home. Within days, these enemy combatants were voluntarily providing intelligence, not because they were coerced, but because they genuinely believed the humans cared about their welfare. Weaponized empathy, Quinn explained, watching Sivith's reaction. Carefully, we didn't just study alien psychology to defeat them. We studied it to understand them so completely that we could make them want to surrender. The next file was more disturbing. It showed human soldiers in the field, tears streaming down their faces as they efficiently dismantled enemy positions. They were weeping for their enemies even as they defeated them. The sorrow protocols. Rex said quietly, his own eyes showing old pain. I was there for some of these. Sivith moved closer to Quinn, her ethereal form almost solid now, drawn by his willingness to reveal such devastating truths. They're crying. Why are your warriors crying? Because we taught them to feel their enemy's pain as if it were their own, Quinn replied, his voice thick with emotion. Perfect tactical awareness included perfect emotional awareness. Our soldiers knew exactly how much suffering they were causing, felt it as if it were happening to them. The final recording was the most chilling. It showed a human commander, General Patricia Voss, standing before the assembled leaders of 7 different species. Without firing a shot, without making a threat, she simply explained what humanity was capable of, not as a boast, but as a warning. We could end this war in 6 hours, she was saying, her voice calm and matter of fact. We could make every soldier in your armies forget how to hold a weapon. We could reprogram your genetic code to make aggression impossible. We could terraform your home worlds to be paradise or wasteland at our whim. But we won't, because the moment we use our full capabilities, we stop being human and become something else entirely. The recording ended with 7 alien leaders signing surrender documents, not out of fear of human weapons, but out of terror at human restraint. Sivith's form had become fully solid now, her otherworldly beauty taking on distinctly feminine curves as she processed what she'd seen. You didn't withdraw because you were defeated. You withdrew because you were too successful. We withdrew, Quinn said, stepping closer to her, because we realized we had become gods of war, and gods shouldn't fight mortals. Rex lowered his weapon completely. The Geneva Protocols weren't just rules of engagement. They were rules to keep us human. Sivith looked between the 2 men. These representatives of a species that had voluntarily exiled itself rather than become monsters. Her attraction to Quinn intensified. Here was a being who guarded ultimate power, while refusing to use it. What happens now? She asked, her voice carrying harmonics that made both men's hearts race. Quinn reached out, his fingers intertwining with hers despite her ethereal nature. Now you take this knowledge back to the Council, and you help them decide whether humanity deserves redemption, and if they decide against you. Quinn's smile was sad but genuine. Then we continue to guard these secrets until we're worthy of them, however long that takes. As Rex prepared to escort Sivith out, she turned back to Quinn. "Will I see you again, if the galaxy decides it needs teachers instead of warriors?" Quinn replied, "Then yes, I think you will." Her kiss was like starlight against his lips, ethereal and solid simultaneously, a promise of possibilities that transcended species and form. The new covenant, the Grand Assembly of the Galactic Council, had never hosted such a momentous session. Representatives from 1,000 worlds filled the crystalline amphitheater, their various forms of communication creating a symphony of sound and light that reflected the diversity of galactic civilization. Ambassador Rose Chen Nakamura stood at the central podium, her mixed heritage evident in features that combined human determination with Lyrian grace. Her diplomatic credentials were impeccable, but it was her unique perspective as a hybrid that gave her words special weight. High Chancellor Drex, his ancient form incorporating features from 12 different species through millennia of genetic adaptation, called the session to order. The assembly recognized as Ambassador Chen Nakamura of the Sol System. Rose's voice carried clearly through the chamber's acoustics. "Honored representatives, I come before you not as a conqueror or a supplicant, but as a bridge between worlds. The question before us today is simple. Is the galaxy ready for humanity's return?" Murmurs rippled through the assembly. In the viewing gallery, Colonel Jake Rivera watched with barely contained tension. His relationship with Rose had grown from professional respect to something deeper over the months of preparation for this moment. But the weight of representing his species kept him focused. "The Terran prohibition was enacted," Rose continued, "not because humanity was weak, but because we were too strong in all the wrong ways. Today, I present evidence that we have learned to be strong in the right ways." The central display activated, showing Colonel Rivera in the field. Unlike the historical recordings that had terrified the galaxy, these showed something entirely different. "Colonel Rivera," Rose called, and Jake stepped forward with military precision. As he approached the podium, their eyes met, and Rose felt her heart skip. Even in this formal setting, the attraction between them was palpable. "Demonstrate Protocol 7, she said softly. Jake nodded and activated a small device. The holographic display showed a simulation of a conflict zone 2, armies facing each other across a devastated landscape. "Traditional warfare," Jake explained, his voice carrying the authority of his rank, "focuses on defeating the enemy. Human warfare now focuses on ending the conflict." The simulation began. Instead of weapons fire, the human forces began broadcasting something unexpected, a compilation of messages from soldiers on both sides, talking about their families, their hopes, their fears. Within hours, Jake continued, enemy combatants began laying down arms and walking toward our lines, not to surrender, but to talk, to find common ground. High Chancellor Drex leaned forward, and if they had refused, Jake's expression became serious. Then we would have demonstrated why they called us the most dangerous species in the galaxy. But the point is, we would have done so with regret, not pleasure. The simulation continued, showing human soldiers teaching former enemies agricultural techniques, sharing medical knowledge, helping rebuild what war had destroyed. This is the new Geneva Protocol, Rose explained, stepping closer to Jake. The space between them seemed to hum with both professional partnership and personal connection. War becomes a last resort, and victory is measured not in enemies defeated, but in enemies converted to friends. A crystalline representative from the Altair system projected a harmonic question. But the capacity for traditional warfare remains? Jake and Rose exchanged a look that carried volumes of communication. Show them, she said quietly. Jake activated a different program. The display showed a single human ship approaching a massive enemy fleet, odds of 1,000,000 to 1. Without firing a shot, the human vessel transmitted a simple message. We know who you are, where you come from, what you value most. We can end this without bloodshed, or we can demonstrate why every species in the galaxy fears us. Choose. The enemy fleet powered down their weapons and requested negotiation. The message, Jake explained, contained detailed analysis of their culture, their psychology, their deepest values, not to destroy them, but to understand them completely. When someone understands you that well, resistance becomes difficult. High Chancellor Drex's multiple optical sensors focused on both humans, and you propose to offer these capabilities to the Galactic Council. Not as weapons, Rose said, her hand briefly touching Jake's arm, a gesture noticed by half the assembly. As tools for peace, humanity requests reinstatement not as a military force, but as ethical warfare consultants. The debate that followed lasted hours. Species that had fought each other for millennia argued about the wisdom of trusting humans with such responsibilities, but gradually a consensus emerged. The vote, High Chancellor Drex announced finally, is 847 in favor, 152 against, with 23 abstentions. The Terran prohibition is hereby lifted, contingent upon adherence to the new Geneva Protocols. The chamber erupted in a cacophony of celebration and concern as delegates began filing out. Rose and Jake found themselves alone at the podium. "We did it," Rose said, her diplomatic composure finally cracking to reveal genuine emotion. "We did," Jake agreed, pulling her into an embrace that was witnessed by the few remaining delegates. Their kiss was broadcast across the galaxy, not just a personal moment, but a symbol of humanity's return to galactic civilization. As they broke apart, Rose smiled at the man who had helped her rebuild her species' reputation. "So, Colonel Rivera, ready to show the galaxy what humans can really do?" Jake's answering smile carried both promise and determination. "Rose, I think the galaxy has no idea what they've just agreed to above them." The stars that had once seemed forbidden to humanity shone with new possibilities, and for the first time in over a century, humans looked to the void not as exiles, but as guardians of peace. The Geneva Protocols had evolved from rules of war into rules of peace, and humanity had finally learned the most important lesson of all. The greatest victory was knowing when not to fight. In the years that followed, human ethical warfare consultants would prevent 17 major conflicts, resolve 33 territorial disputes, and establish the framework for permanent peace between species that had been enemies for millennia. But they would always remember the price of their power and the responsibility that came with being the galaxy's most dangerous peacekeepers. The age of human warfare was over. The age of human wisdom had begun.